Well, what about the cost of living issue now? And the RBA put out figures saying that personal wealth was down 11% since the global financial crisis. By that they mean things like the value of your house, your property, shares and so on, and that feeds into superannuation. So they're not talking about disposable income. But still, perhaps that explains why a lot of people are grumpy when the economy is relatively sound.
Yes, because house prices have been either static or falling slightly. And when the value of your house is rising, you feel tremendously financially secure. And that financial security has ebbed away. And at the same time, prices are, as they always do, they continue to rise. I mean, the notion that Campbell Newman is suddenly going to be able to Canute-like stop the rise of the cost of living is pretty ludicrous. But at the same time, there have been these massive and very, very expensive investments in the nuts and bolts of delivering electricity to the markets. Yeah. And on top of that, of course, is coming the carbon tax.
And when do those price rises hit? The 1st of July, just as the carbon tax hits.
Just as the carbon tax hits. And Abbott has been extremely skillful, even before the carbon tax has begun, to characterise every cost of living increase as somehow tied to the carbon tax.
I think the big problem the government faces here is this disconnection between the data, the statistics on the economy and the sentiment of ordinary people. And I don't think they've managed to address that yet. I mean, you look at consumer sentiment and the figures we saw from the RBA show that people are worried about their situation. The government keeps quoting unemployment figures, that inflation's in check, that kind of thing. I think the problem for the government is those figures become devalued, and when you do have a trend in the right direction in the big macro sense, it's not having an impact on the ordinary person, and they've got to address that.
I think, Karen, you look beyond the macro sense, and what is really happening here, we're seeing a shift of manufacturing's dead in New South Wales, in Victoria. Where is the big growth? You see the school system in Western Australia groaning under extra 5,000 kids, a month or whatever the figure is. It's just huge.
Two goes at lunch hour because there's not enough room in the playgrounds for people to all have lunch at the same time.
Well, there you are. You see? Yeah. And now, no matter what the macro figure says about the economy growing, the anecdote that David recounts about a school having to cycle kids out to have lunch in blocks because there's not enough capacity in the playground to cope with. In Western Australia, while there are empty schools in New South Wales and Victoria, tells the real story.
Now, on power prices, though, here's another dilemma for the government too, that New South Wales figures, for example, power prices will go up 25%. 10% of that will be due to the carbon tax.
Yeah.
But who's going to know the difference? Who will discriminate? They'll be compensated for the 10%. They won't be compensated for the 25%. How does the government get that message out that this is basically due to the cost of new infrastructure and not to the carbon tax?
Well, the federal government is asking for bills to be itemised so that there is, in fact, a line-by-line itemisation of the increase in costs. I suppose that's a bit of a risk if it ends up being more than they anticipate, but they're hoping that people will get their bill and say, oh, I see, the carbon tax is only affecting 10%,
but the power
price has
won't
gone
do
up.
that.
Well, that's right. They'd have to get the cooperation of power companies, many of which are now privatised, so why would they agree?
But it doesn't really matter because the average punter can understand that it costs to replenish and maintain the power station. But when they see a new tax there, that's the figure that they will zero in on. You only have to speak to any Labor MP.
But that's the one they get compensated for.
Well, but then, as every Labor MP will say, the voter doesn't get it. Why are they getting, if they have to pay a tax, why are they getting that money back? What's this tax doing? It's not going to decrease the temperature of the globe. Why do we have it?
Well, let's put that question to David Murray, who's the outgoing chairman, as you know, of the Future Fund. Here's his view.